Hey everybody, this is Phil from Zaid Comics, and I am the writer of the upcoming graphic novel set to launch on Indiegogo in August called Magic Cop, and I am just one half of the two best looking brothers in all of comics. And today we're going to be talking about writing comics and panel layouts, but first I want to take a look at our mailing list that we just set up for Zaid Comics. If you go to the link below, it'll take you to this page, which gives you a brief synopsis of our comic Magic Cop that we're launching on Indiegogo. It's basically if you take 1980s crime television shows like Miami Vice and cram it with fantasies like Halloween Town or Dungeons and Dragons, and you get this crazy high-paced, super bright colored 1980s magic comic book. So check that out. We want to build up a good following so you guys could get a chance to read our free comic book. It's a 12-page mini pilot issue before the crowdfunding campaign launches, and you'll be the first to know when it does, and you'll get some exclusive content on top of that. So on with what the video's about today. We're talking about paneling. I did a video on paneling earlier, talking about paneling in horror genre of comics and how you could set the mood with your panel layouts. Today we're going to talk about pacing. And the specifically, as an example, I'm going to use Mr. Miracle as an example. This book started coming out monthly in 2017. It is a great read. I highly recommend it. It's by Tom King and Mitch Gerards. Mitch is a fantastic artist. He does the pencils, the inks, the colors, and he letters this book too. So he's doing everything on here. Tom King is writing it. And Tom King is very well known for pacing his comics in a very specific way by using the 9 panel grid method. And we could see that right here. You know, three, 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 3x3s. So what this does is you have a lot of control over your pacing. Now 9x9 or 9 panel grid usually is the max you want to go with panels on your page. If you go over than that, things can get cluttered and you won't really know where to read. But the 9 panel grid, it's a little unorthodox, and it also allows you to control a lot of the pacing. As you see in this scene, um, you could tell that this happens in a mere amount of seconds. That Orion teleports into Mr. Miracle's house and then tells him to stand up and just starts beating him up and tells him he just keeps doing it over and over and tells him to stand up, punches him in the face, and then that happens. But the pacing of it, kind of like a movie, you could see the seconds go by while you're reading the book. Now I want to take a look at issue 2 here. Awesome cover by Mitch. This is, I mean, not a lot happens on this page, but you still have that 9 panel grid, and you can see Granny Goodness. She's waiting. You know, she might be thinking about something, and she's looking pretty grim and mad right here in this third panel. And then as you go down, she's worried. The boom tube opens, teleporting in Mr. Miracle and Big Barda, and then she puts on this face, this happy face, and you have to wonder with these previous panels, is she just putting it on for them, or is she happy to see them? And what is she thinking? So this page raises questions and shows the emotion of the character very well because it's basically a time lapse of what is happening in this story. As she gets happier and she greets Big Barda and Mr. Miracle. So I want to highlight that because it's giving you that cinematic feel, even though this whole page could have been a just splash page or 2 panels of Granny because the time is so minute. It could have been just 2 panels showing Granny mad and then Granny happy when the boom tomb happens. But since we're working with a 9 panel grid here, it gives you much more layers to the story and to this page. Uh, issue 6 we're jumping up to. It's one of my favorite issues in the series because of this 9 panel grid layout. In action sequences, because what it does is it stretches that time and it stretches the motion. That every panel here is basically a choreographed movie scene. You can see he's jumping through this wall, dodging these lasers, and all while he's having a conversation with Big Barda. So the 9 panel grid layout allows you to frame by frame pick what you want the reader to see, as well um, the reader to actually be reading and conveying the dialogue through. And I was thinking about this before I started filming this, that it's really what Tom King's doing here is making comics read like regular conversation, or conversations in TV shows or movies, like the conversation that happens in a show like Arrested Development, where the dialogue's really fast, it's natural, it has these beats that everyone is used to, and using the panels in this way allows you to hit those beats and make the dialogue feel real. Now I want to go through some of these pages here because, as you could see, this could be just its own page. And it is, basically. Mitch drew it as one big page and threw on the gutters, as they're called, to break up the page into this sequence, so your eye could follow. But instead of it just being this big page, because you have the water at the top here, and it looks like when you just look at it, it's like, oh, that could have just been a splash page. But as you read along, there's different things happening in the panels, conveying time passing. Uh, Go to the next one, and another fight scene with a bunch of dialogue. Again, this one panel could have been um, a larger panel, and you could have squeezed some of this dialogue into one panel, stretching it out, but having them smaller, the conveying of time and the beats of dialogue. As Barda pushes this weapon through this guy's head. Barda's pretty brutal. She's a real badass. I'm in love with her secretly. So this page is amazing. They're trying to get to, I think they're breaking into, man, is it, they're breaking into Highfather's place on New Genesis to go talk to Orion. I think that's what they're doing. This isn't Apocalypse. It's too colorful to be Apocalypse. And they're dodging all these death traps and lasers and underwater crap. And Mr. Miracle, of course, is the world's, or the universe's, the galaxy's, the universe's greatest escape artist. So he can get out of anything. But this room keeps getting smaller and smaller. And the panel layout and design of this is great, making you feel claustrophobic, where there's nothing in the room except for you, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And Barda is squatting the room. It's like a Star Wars scene until there's almost nothing left. I just love. I wanted to point out this display, and how the page is designed to convey the stress of the situation. Kind of going back, if you guys haven't seen, like I said, I did the other panel video talking about conveying emotion and fear and anxiety in your pages through horror comics, and this is exactly what that's doing. Now, maybe you could say that it would have conveyed even more terror if instead of the white space it was black. Maybe, perhaps, but that's a choice that Mitch made. So yeah, that's a good example of how many panels on a page shows the passing of time. And then now we get to the great book, Sin City. The Hard Goodbye, Frank Miller's first Sin City story. And as you could see right off the bat, if you guys are a fan of comic books, you may have seen the film Sin City, and that film was a direct rip from the pages of Frank Miller's art. So this is one of the opening seeds of the story of Marv. Mickey Rourke played Marv. Awesome character, one of my favorite actors. And this is one page, two panels with a bunch of narration from Marv on the first panel and then some on the second. But as you can see, we're still talking about the passing of time in comics and panels, that even though this is only two panels, because there's so much dialogue on it, it puts you in the moment and makes it last forever. And just on this panel alone, even though there's one dialogue box, you get sunk into the panel as it pans out and Marv falls asleep. So I love the use of time in these two panels, and we're going to see in this book that he doesn't use a lot of panels on his pages, but as this page keeps you there with the narration and the zoom out of the page and the blackness around it, that this page, which also has two panels, but it's a big action scene with short dialogue bubbles that passes time very quickly. He breaks down the door and he rams this guy's head into the wall. And that's it. You don't need to stay on this page at all. That page is over, even though it's two panels of great art compared to the last one. Totally, totally different. And this is a huge splash page with not a lot going on it, but again, it's that frame of time pacing. Three panels here, big action sequence, and I've heard comic pros talk about this. The panels with a bunch of detail. Yeah, this his coat, wrinkles, and all this glass here, these tiny squares of the glass from the windshield. That took him a while to draw, and it's on this page with three panels, and it's over just like that. Some of the most detailed pages, like splash pages of cityscapes, are so time consuming to draw, and yet sometimes they're just the page turners. They're like, wow, that's really pretty. Onto the action, onto the narration, onto the dialogue, turning the page. So if you talk to a lot of artists, they're saying those take the most amount of time, but they're the easiest pages to read. Just like this. Um, this was the like episodic intro, great page. It just right to the point, not a lot on it, and it carries you to the next one. Now to the second half of the story, he changes up the narration layouts and the panel layouts, and it's a really interesting choice. He pulls the narration out of the art and puts it on the side here in the margin. And I've never seen this in any other book. I've read a lot of comics, but nothing really comes to mind, but this one stands out. When I was reading it, I was reading it on a plane on the way to LA, and it just popped out at me. I'm like, wow, that's super interesting. I wonder if I want to do that. So maybe I'll play with that in some of my upcoming books. I think the Lost Pages, I'm gonna might throw that into some stories to really isolate the narration from the art and see how that goes, because it's really interesting take. Again, this is just a pinup shot of Marv, but you have to stay on this page because the narration is forcing you to stay on this page because there's a chunk right there. Whoops. And then this is the last one we're going to look at for Sin City and panel layout timing. Again, nice chunk of art here with some dialogue, but the narration is what keeps you on the page. So it's good to think about, panel layout and narration layout. And if he didn't choose to put the narration on the sidelines, he would have to find somewhere on the art to place it. So thinking about it now, perhaps his reasoning behind that is he didn't want to cover up any of the art. So he actually moved it out of the margins of, or out of the borders of the art and put it into the margin. Really smart thinking, and uh, it really stuck in my mind. So, you know, it's getting people to think about it, and that's great for his comics. Sin City's a great book. Pick it up. There's a bunch of stories in it. I highly recommend it. And I hope you guys really got a sense of timing and pacing through different styles of panels and different layouts of your page. Um, like I said before, go check out my previous video I did on evoking emotion and through panels and terror and horror comics, stuff like that. This has been Phil. If you guys liked the video, give us a like down below and hit that notification button after you sub. We're trying to get at least 50 subs before the end of the month so we can get our own URL for YouTube, and check out that mailing list. We put up videos every weekday, and I hope to see you back here next time. Thanks for watching.